Streaming. Let's see if it. Trying to refresh the screen over here. See if I see anything.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah, we are live.
All right, so it looks like we
So
are live, everybody. This is Tim Picciott, the Liberty advisor and also the latest contributor for World Alternative Media, here with familiar face John Sneisen, economic analyst and author. And just wanted to give a quick introduction because I have been posting some videos and a lot of the videos that I had posted originally, it wasn't with Wham in mind. So when Josh was sick, I guess he's still kind of sick. We just posted some of these videos out, and I'm still not the best interviewer. No one's great at anything the first time they do it. So today we've got a whole bunch of different economic data that we're going to go over. John and I are going to bounce ideas off each other. We've done a few podcasts in the past before, but if John want to say hey, what's up to everybody?
hey guys, how are you? And it's a pleasure seeing you guys again. It's been a while since I've done a live stream here at World Alternative Media, so it's exciting to be back in the game and sharing some very interesting news that's happening out in the world right now.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head right there. It's back in the game because all we are is two guys who see how the system is screwing everybody, and it's I'm not the world's best presentation type guy, but when I saw how this whole system worked and how it's basically this whole monetary system is just a tool for global enslavement, I wanted to go out and tell people about it, and so the only way to tell people about it is to start telling people, and the more you do it the better you get. But we do have some interesting articles today. The first one we're going to pull up is actually a zero hedge article that Josh actually beat us to the punch talking about, so that guy's always on top of everything. But it's Trump admits it's the Fed's job to push stocks higher. And so I want to get your take on this article right now. We do have it up on the screen because in the past it was essentially we all knew that it was the Fed's job to financialize the economy, but now here we actually have Donald Trump coming out and saying if the Fed had done its job properly, which it has not, the stock market would have been up 5,000 to 10,000 additional points, and GDP would have been well over 4% instead of 3%, with almost no inflation. Quantitative tightening was a killer, should have done the exact opposite. And just want to see if we can get your take on that because it really is an incredible
Yeah.
announcement, especially from the president.
Well, I love the comment with almost no inflation. How are you going to do? Like when you print money and you get the stock market up, that is inflation in itself of the stock market price because you're pushing more money into the stock market. So I don't know where Trump has gotten his economic education from, but he's like all over the place. Sometimes he's very right, spot on. Especially when he was running for president, he was pointing out a lot of interesting things, especially about the Fed auditing the Fed, talking about gold standards, all this stuff. But right now, it just baffles me that he would say that there'd be no inflation if the stock market was pushed up. And of course, what we got to understand is the stock market is not, and of course, real estate prices is not really accounted for. When it comes to inflation, so you get it's very hard to actually see the real money that has flown into the economy because the money currently has been pushed into the stock market and the real estate markets, and you've seen massive bubbles. They created zero bound interest rates for a very very long time, the Federal Reserve, and now you see the complete failure of that system. They tried to hike interest rates up to then because every single time they try to adjust down in interest rates to stop a bubble that they created in the first place, they have had to go down 5 to almost 7 points sometimes, 700 basis points. So that's 5 to 7% every time. And now you're seeing us only up at 225 till 250, 2.50% in interest rates. And we are struggling. Donald Trump is calling for interest rate cuts and quantitative easing. He just I don't know what to say. Like he's just looking for more printing of money, and that's not going to make anybody wealthy. What we got to understand when assets goes up in value, a lot of times it's caused by the currency that is flowing into that asset or to that commodity. So it's based on the market capitalization versus the actual supply of that commodity. And of course, with the stock market now, of course, ETFs and all these other derivatives of the stock market, you can't really have a real valuation of anything. And of course, seeing the stock market being up at this and he wanting it to be 10 10,000% higher, the Dow Jones.
Like
You're
38% higher, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, how are you going to do that? Like, the thing is here, they are needing more and more, ever more money to print to prop up these assets. And that is what you're seeing here. So that's why he's whining and bitching about the stock market not being fixed by the Fed's manipulation here.
Yeah, and so and another part of what he said in the article, I'm just going to it right now, and actually I jumped ahead here, is and you had mentioned in the past that he was very good in this stuff. When he was a candidate, he was talking about how 19 different times he said that the unemployment number was the phoniest, most fake number there was. At one point, he even said this is a number only designed to make politicians and presidents look good. And it's funny, I posted that on my Facebook page without attributing it to him, and everyone's like, screw you, you effing libtard. And meanwhile, it was a Donald Trump quote. And now here we have him saying, this was in April 11th of 2012, the Fed should not do QE3. Neither the economy nor the dollar can withstand another round of artificial liquidity. And it looks like the joke is on us because apparently it has been able to withstand it. And eventually, we don't know exactly how this is going to shake out. And another article that we have here from Zero Hedge is Trader warns markets are quiet because no one has a clue. And I'm actually going to say this right now that even myself, a guy that's been in the market, who's been calling a lot of things pretty correctly, that I don't even know where things are going right now. And so we do, not to give a shameless plug, but the day before the market started going down in October, I put out a client video stating that basically, there's all these reasons why I think the market's going to go down. So what we're doing is putting together a portfolio where we're going to have some put options in there. So if the market ends up going down for all the various reasons that we listed, and everyone watching this right now knows, if the market does go down, then my clients would be not be nearly as affected. Or if they have some sort of melt up situation where we just print a whole bunch of money and reverse course, which I came out with another client video on, I think it was December 28th, right after, they pulled out all the stops where they had the plunge protection team coming in there. They had, Mnuchin coming out. They, they had basically all the cavalry to make things better, I'll say better in air quotes. And I said, hey, listen, if the Fed reverses course and everything, you can see the market go back and testing up new highs. And here we are, I believe, within 2% on the S&P and Dow of all-time highs. And now you're getting guys even like, I believe it's Larry Fink. Let me head over to this article right now. And what we see is CEO of world's largest asset manager. I mean, so usually these are guys that know something, although we will get into Ray Dalio, who's another one of the other largest asset managers. We have a risk of melt up. And so basically, as a lot of listeners here and subscribers know that, one of the main things that's driving everything and what we just talked about is the fact that these central banks are printing money. And when they print money, they're making the money worth less and less and less. And so it's like if you're in a monopoly board and you just give everybody an extra $5,000, it didn't mean Park Place is now worth X amount because of some, appreciation. It's because you just gave everybody a ton of money. And then with that ton of money, they can then bid up asset prices, which is the exact inflation that so it's ridiculous that Donald Trump says, we did all this with no inflation. So we were able to rise asset prices on everything without any inflation, which basically is the inflation. So right now we are, what kind of comments do you have about we got Larry Fink saying we have a risk of a melt up?
Well, I think it's totally possible that we can see more piling into the stock market. I think we're at the threshold where we're seeing the manipulation going on right now with the Fed and everybody. And of course, I've said before, and I think I've done a video on it, where we talked about how this central bank policies of Japan is going to head our way. And what we're seeing currently with, of course, the Bank of Japan is they bought stocks, they bought real estate to prop up markets over there as they're in a stagnant, deflationary demographic downturn. And what we're seeing on the other end is that those policies, being touted by guys like Ben Bernanke back in 2002 when he did his inaugural speech. It was talking about we need to look at more assets that we can buy.
I like to call him Osama Ben Bernanke, by the way. So
Ben Bernanke.
Sorry about that. Had to slip that in there.
He is probably one of the worst financial terrorists out there, together with some of the big CEOs like Jamie Dimon. And others out there, they're truly financial terrorists.
I like to call him Jamie Dimon, but stole that from Jeff Berwick. So
yeah, exactly. No, these guys, I don't know. You probably could see something happening again. But as I said, for example, in Japan, 86.11% of all the ETFs is bought up by the Bank of Japan. So you're looking at assets that is for the population. It's just been bought up because they were getting sold off so bad that the Bank of Japan had to buy them to prop up the stock markets and everything around it. So what you probably could see here is, of course, a panic now that we get more and more stagnant numbers. You have the IMF, down grading the growth that they're looking at. Of course, they're always wrong. And then you had the United States mention that they had to downgrade their Q4 growth that they had as well. So you're seeing we are probably, if you look at inflation and count everything that's in there, you're probably looking at like negative growth in the economy already. So we are in a downturn here, and I think potentially now that you have Trump saying stuff like this on social media, that is definitely like a desperate move because he's trying to keep the confidence in the economy and having investors still piling in money. Meanwhile, you have the Wall Street, big guys. They're slowly selling off because they need to have those dupes into the investments at the peak of it to be able to exit from those investments, of course.
Yeah, what we've seen is just, a complete financialization of the economy. And the thing that I'm most disheartened by Donald Trump, and for people that don't know, I mean, I was a libertarian. I had a Facebook page called Libertarian Advisor. I was trying to convince, well, at the time, I was still, wanted to pull for the libertarians, although I thought voting was, still pretty useless. And then, when it was Bill Weld came out and said that handguns are more dangerous than AR-15s, I'm like, you know what? At least Trump isn't, he's talking a pretty good game with the Fed. He's talking a pretty good game with unemployment data. It sounds like he read my book. I mean, it's just sort of crazy. And what is most disheartened me is to now, as soon as he's in there playing all the games like normal politicians do, and it's even worse because he knows the inside baseball and this stuff. And what he's trying to do is to deceive all of his, what I call them the Trump tards, these guys out there who are going to, just as bad as people that, were huge into Obama, where, he can do no wrong. And, or they've got other things that we'll get into in a bit where, there's this 4D chess of, you and I aren't smart enough to understand exactly what's going on. But what's going on is he's trying to grade himself based upon propping up the stock market, propping up the traditional economy. And for everything that's going on right now, there is no long-term fixes for anything that he's doing. All he's doing is getting my kids, my future grandkids, further and further into debt, further having the noose wrapped around their neck while pretending everything is better. And now the worst situation is going to happen where, I really wanted him to win initially because I thought there's no way they're going to be able to, have this artificial economy last for another 4 years. But, the Trump effect gave everybody all this artificial hope. The artificial hope, along with, the tax cuts that then led companies to then repatriate their money back to America, gave the stock market a temporary boost. So people are conflating the stock market with the economy. Those are two separate things. You've got, it's a huge percentage of the new jobs that are created are going to people who are making less than $30,000 a year. You've got about 60% of all baby boomers who are 55 to 65 years old who have less than $100,000 saved. So you've got over half of the economy's soon to be retirees are going to be living off $4,000 a year of savings that they can pull off from their investments. So assuming they had they're at 100,000, pulling 4%, you're looking at just a piddly amount. And then the average Social Security payment is probably about $15,000 a year. So great, all of our baby boomers are going to be retiring off $15,000 to $19,000 a year. I think it was Jeffrey Gundlach of DoubleLine who said that right now as a country, we're spending 6 times more on the baby boomers than we are in the millennials. Not that I'm looking for any handouts, but a country that is investing into dying people and not investing into the youth, is not a very good situation that's going on. And so it's just ridiculous that we're even in this situation. And as you mentioned with the Bank of Japan, right now there is no way out of this situation, which brings me to the next article over here from Zero Hedge. No fix for recession. Central banks are trapped in more ways than one. And to give you guys an idea of how, neutered, financial advisors are when it comes to giving investment advice. I remember in 2012, I emailed a client, shortly after I moved to Arizona, maybe it was 2011, where I talked about the Federal Reserve being trapped. And they actually then chastised me because they, intercepted the email and said, you're not allowed to speculate that the Federal Reserve is trapped or stuck between a rock and a hard place because that's only your opinion and blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, financial advisors aren't even allowed to give financial advice, assuming that there's very few of us out there that even know this type of stuff. But, we've seen right now that we've had a balance sheet that's only been able to get down a tiny, tiny bit. So it's like the economy's, a 600-pound person that's lost, 20 pounds. And now we're talking about if we lose any more weight, it's going to kill us because we can't afford to diet anymore. Because all these Trump gains are predicated on getting more and more debt. That's why the deficit's gone up 77%. And if you can't have the Republicans who controlled everything the first 2 years, if you can't have them reining the debt, then who the heck's going to do it? And so, this entire economy is just financialized. It's globalized. We've got another article here about global stocks hit 6-month high on renewed trade talk optimism. And this is a theme that actually Peter Schiff has talked about, where I'd like to get your commentary on this, where Peter's opinion, and I agree with this as well, that it's almost better for them not to even come up with a trade deal because they keep talking about like this future trade deal. Like, we're going to have one. It's going to be pretty good. It's not going to be like the USMCA or NAFTA, where all we did was basically change the name and make it even worse acronym, and nothing really even ended up changing on it. So I just want to get your, kind of a take on maybe the Chinese trade deal. And, if it's, in my opinion, it's going to be, buy the rumor, sell the fact. And how do you think Donald Trump is best going to play this?
Well, I think with the Chinese trade deal in the first place, I think it's just a excuse to the problems with the markets that we are seeing. We saw, the big crashes that happened, especially in December. We saw when, as you said, when they brought out the heavy artillery to keep confidence in the markets. I think we're going to see a continuum of just this using trade talks, using other things that are happening outside of the actual real economic big issues that we have with all this massive debt. You've got zombie corporations running around, drooling all over the economy, making more zombies all over the place, where they just, a zombie corporation or zombie country, which we also have a lot of places, is somebody that just only pays the interest on their debt. And there's a lot of them now. I believe the last numbers was out. It was 15 to almost 20% of corporations in the United States, major corporations, were zombies. And what we're seeing here is, again, in my point of view, Tim, it's just an excuse to put forward, somebody that you can blame for the big crisis that's coming ahead there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's almost Easter now, so pretty soon maybe we can blame the Easter Bunny on what's going on. I mean, so who knows?
Yeah, the Easter Bunny is pretty sinister. He can do a lot of crazy stuff, and of course he's as elusive as Keynesian money printing will fix the economy.
And I guess there actually is a tie-in with the Easter Bunny, and if you talk about all the central banking activity where you had the Jesus with the money changers. And when you think about it, this is a topic that, should be, not that we're trying to get super religious here, but, if you want to, depending on whatever your views of religion are, and it's funny that I was talking about the Federal Reserve and all this different information. And one day I had somebody tell me like, hey, you just ripped all that stuff off from the book of Revelations. I'm like, well, I'm not religious and I never even read the book of Revelations, and somehow I was able to come up with like all the same, data points as what was in the Bible without ever reading it. And then that started getting me, intrigued. And so, not to make a little, segue, because we didn't, plan on talking about this, but Jesus did die from money changers, and it was, as soon as you start effing with their money, that's when they come to get you. When you get a little bit of influence, people start listening to you, especially on the scale that he was at. And what's going on today is about 1 billion times worse than what was going on back then. I mean, I think anyone here would like even trade in what's going on, today for the money changing system back then. And you even had, what was it, Henry Ford, who said if Americans understood the banking system, there'd be a revolution before the morning. Except I believe he said that before the Federal Reserve was even created. So you can imagine, how bad things are getting here. Now, another article I want to shift gears to right now is we've got an article from Jim Grant, who what is it? The Interest Rate Observer, I believe is his newsletter. And the title is "The Worldwide Suppression of Interest Rates Has Been a Crime." And for me, what what really drives me nuts is there is one, I'm sure there's a few of them. There's a few liberal pages, Facebook pages that I follow. One of them is called Patriotic Millionaires, and it's all about taxing the rich and how these are these super rich jet private jet flying guys who are like hey, if we can just tax the rich more and we can just have the Federal Reserve print more money and give it to poor people. And what they don't realize is that it is the Federal Reserve who is making everyone more and more poor, and the richest people in the world are essentially the ones who get the money first, who are then able to speculate and then charge everybody else, 27% interest. And so with Jim Graham, it must be a pretty easy job now if you're the interest rate observer, because, for about, 6 or 7 years or 8 years, probably it was just, at zero. So, it's pretty easy to observe what's going on. And now, it's very obvious that, especially in light of, Donald Trump's, recent rhetoric, that the trajectory is rates are going back down to zero. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time Trump is, not let's say elected, but by the time the 2020 election rolls around again, not again, but by the time 2020 rolls around, I wouldn't be surprised if the rates are back at zero. But they don't want to help him out, and and I'm not trying to bash the president here, because I was one of his most vociferous supporters who were out there, was reaching millions of people. Basically took like 2 or 3 months off. Did all this different stuff to try to help him win. And now I see, if you're going after guys like Assange, you're going after you're essentially in bed with the Federal Reserve. And I don't care about what 4D chess of, he's really, he's putting all these guys in there because he's really going to have, because QAnon said that he's actually going to nationalize the Federal Reserve. So you guys just need to trust the plan. My job as a financial planner, and my initials are trust the plan. And I don't trust anything that's going on. I used to have a 6'2" life-size cutout of Trump that my wife got me that I used to record behind. So if anyone's saying that, I'm a never Trumper, or that, I don't understand what's going on, I know exactly what's going on. And if there was 1,000 things that the president wanted to do, if there's 1,000 things that I wanted to do, but the one that didn't happen was, having some structural reform at the Fed, aka ending the Fed, or aka even allowing competing alternative currencies to compete in the marketplace. If that's not done, I don't care about the other 999 things that may have been great. Because as far as I'm concerned, the other things that he did do that are so great, or he's the greatest president in my lifetime. Oh, that's a really high bar. He's my adult lifetime has been George W. Bush and Obama. Like, ooh, that's quite the bar to beat. And then, or maybe the Bush Senior. And I was around in Bill Clinton. Yeah. So we've got all he's the best ever. Like, yeah, that's great. This is the best cancer we've ever had. So in terms of the Jim Grant article, anything you've got to say in terms of interest rates being a crime?
Well, actually, Tim, I sent you something on Facebook Messenger. So can you look that up right now? And I have a chart of the historical interest rates of the United States from 1954 to kind of give people a overview over how interest rates is at such record lows. And what you got to understand about interest rates is when they are getting held down, you have the savers are getting demolished. You have the pension funds, that we're looking at, 6 to 7% of returns. Now they're in the stock market, which is very highly risky. I looked at the Norwegian oil fund; they are almost 70% equities, which is ridiculous. Like you're looking at a lot of risk being taken because of that. The actual worries that we're gonna actually not make the return and be able to fund these pension funds. They are going out to buying bonds from very highly speculative places, which is still pretty low, but at least they yield like 3, 4, 5%. But that's junk bonds that a lot of them are investing in, which is extremely risky. And of course, today as well, you're looking. Josh, we're covering a triple A rated credit, collateralized debt obligation that was issued here in Canada by Bank of Montreal. And how can you triple rate anything that is under, a nation that's triple A rated? It shouldn't be triple A rated if you actually know how rating works. So it's very interesting to see that. But that's, of course, the only thing that pension funds are allowed to invest in. And they get duped because pension fund managers are not the smartest cookie. The guys in the class, the big guys, the guys that are really smart that are managing money, they're on Wall Street. They are not, the big pension fund guys. They just take advice from whoever throws it at them, and then they buy it. and that's unfortunate. But if you look at this,
We do have it pulled up right now for
yeah, I
everyone
see it.
watching.
Yeah. So if you actually look at this chart, it's very interesting to see how you have the peak in '80s, but then every single time I don't have the recessions on this chart, but every single time there was a recession, you get a big drop down, and it's between 5 to 7% that they drop it. And you see the last drop that we had in 2008,
Oh,
we
sorry.
basically went down to we went down to zero. And it's been, as you can see, there's clearly been massive manipulation over that time span, which should kind of wake people up. I think that we've seen this massive, zero bound, and now they're up at 225. I don't think I have the current rate on there, but you see the whole manipulation here for almost 10 years that happened with the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates so low, and that had really devastated the savings and everybody else, and completely demolished the economy in itself, because the average interest rates throughout world history has been about 5%, that you see mostly out there, and when you bring it this low, people are making a lot of crazy risky bets out there in the economy, and it's not very good. You're looking at the top taxed economies in the world, because people are getting taxed to death in Scandinavian countries, for example. They're at the top also for private debt. So they accumulate private debt because it's still super cheap in those nations, to then cover what they're losing in tax increases. And now you're having a hugely indebted population in so many places. Like, I don't believe the United States is the biggest one that's coming, but I think biggest bubbles that's coming is Canada, Australia, England, Norway, Sweden. You got a couple more,
Australia.
Hong Kong, yeah, Australia, of course, that is currently crashing. So you see all this debt has just completely demolished the economy, and there's no risk aversion at all in the economy, and everybody's just making wild bets, and that's why you're seeing the massive roar in the asset prices, from real estate to stocks, and of course this is so damaging. It's eviscerating the economy. And actually, if you take and you we were talking about the money in the Fed. If you actually take and corrupt the system of money that you use, you corrupt everything else within it.
Yeah, and
That's my point of view, anyways.
yeah, one thing I want to point out too, especially with you're talking about the pension funds, is there is, and I'm just in my Evernote right now trying to find this, but there is a rule change that actually, anytime government comes out with a new rule, that's a great thing. But I'm trying to see if this will actually play. All right, just a second here. So I'm just in my Evernote over here. So there was a pension provision in, it's called the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century Act. So that way it's going to be good. We love the Little Kids So Much Act or the Patriot Act. It's always the opposite of whatever you call it. And essentially, what the skip to the end version of this is, the pensions are now mandated to use for a rate of interest. In the past, what they did is they used a 2-year LIBOR number with the average of the previous 2 years LIBOR. And so I do have, I believe right here, a historical chart. Actually, it's having some trouble pulling it up right now. But what is going on, long story short, is now they switched it to a rolling, I believe it's 25-year segment of LIBOR. So long story short, it's hard to see this, but so right now we're in 2019. So the banks are able to, and actually I'm trying to see if I can, let me see if I can blow this up here and move it to the different screen. All right, just a second here, if you guys bear with me. This is live. So what we're seeing here is, and I've never seen anybody else come out with this research. This is directly from the IRS website. So the banks right now are able to assume a rate around 6% for what they can earn keeping money basically at a bank or parking it in LIBOR. So they can assume they're earning 6% right now, which right now LIBOR is probably closer to 2 or 1. And so the pension funds are giving actuarial tables based off numbers that are 6%. And so And all this came about is because I was looking at one of my clients' pension funds because he has the ability to either take it out in a lump sum and maybe we could do like an annuity with it, which would create, which all a pension is a form of annuity. And so what I was taking a look at is seeing what we can get in the private market versus what we can get versus what his big Fortune 500 company was going to offer him. And that company had about, I think it was 78 or 80% of their planned pension assets were in bonds. And the rate of assumed interest was over 6%. So part of what they can do is what they call window dressing in the industry, where maybe what's going on is, like December 31st, they can go and shift their assets around and say, hey, look, now this is what the composition of our portfolio looks like. And that way, in terms of, when they're calculating out the solvency of their plan, they can then say, hey, 80% of our plan is assumed, a guaranteed rate of 6%, even though there's no way in hell they're going to earn that. And there's actually like a range too where they can go higher than this. And then as the years keep going by, I believe they ratchet up like another like 10% a year until you get up to 2024. So after 2024, it's hard for me to see, but basically, long story short, is the pension plans are already screwed, like beyond belief. And that's not even with taking into consideration the fact that the numbers they're using are all BS, rigged, manipulated numbers to begin with. And it's just something that I happened to kind of stumble upon myself, about maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And I think Josh and I did cover it in one of the videos that we made. But shifting gears here now, we've got an article from everyone's favorite hedge fund billionaire, Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio runs Bridgewater Associates, which I believe is actually the largest hedge fund in the world. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I just believe it is. And so, what he's saying is, capitalism is no longer working for most Americans. What we got to do is, we just have to create another law. We have to tax more people. We have to, take money from, the productive economy of capitalists and give it to the government, and the government's going to be able to solve everything. So, something tells me there's ulterior motives going on with this guy of, maybe he realized that he's going to be able to get government business by talking up this way. Maybe he realizes that, he's, going to be the new darling of, Wall Street if he just, because, obviously when you're saying this stuff, all the leftists are going to rush to you. So, what do you have to say about, Dalio coming out and saying, that basically, capitalism needs to be fixed?
Well, that makes me laugh because, first of all, if you're looking at the word capitalism, it actually means, the true word of it means free markets, which we haven't had in centuries. So there's no capitalism. So we got to fix the crony capitalism. But giving money to the government is not going to fix anything with corrupt corporations that are using the government. So now we're even giving more power to the government that is being used by the big corporations. So it's just making it so much worse by giving all this money to, especially giving money to governments that are so inefficient at moving economic activity. Actually, they steal economic activity wherever they get implemented, whatever red tape they put out, and so on. They slow down the private economy. And let me tell you about what happens when the government gets too big of a part of the economy. And we've seen this in the southern European states where the government hit over 50% over the economy. So they were 50% government expenditure to GDP, which means that the government is bigger than the private sector. And sure enough, it was not very much after a lot of these countries went to over to 50%. Some of them had 55, 56%. They collapsed because the private sector is the actual one funding the government. And what we don't understand is, of course, they're looking at getting away from that now because they know that the taxpayers need to fund them. So they're looking at two ways to either do this. There, of course, the massive deficit spending is one, because they're basically borrowing money that they never asked the population if they could borrow in the first place to promote all these programs and keep the economy growing, which is ridiculous. It's actually the deficit of the government is the actual whole freaking government. That's in my point of view. The whole government is the deficit, and that is the problem here. We're looking at a kind of a tumor that has arisen here, and everybody's painting it as the capitalist system. Meanwhile, it's crony. It's actually more communist, because the central bank is actually a branch usually of the communist money system, which is centrally planned, of course, and central planning is communism. So what
Or
you're
even
seeing
fashion, or
is
even fascism too. I mean, if
yeah, and 100. Well, we have corporate fashion. We can call it corporate fashion. This is even a better word for it than crony capitalism, because you're seeing just the support of these big organizations. They are putting in more laws, making it harder for others to compete with them. And slowly over time, they're just gaining themselves close to monopoly power, and that's where we're seeing now in a lot of sectors, especially in the United States, Canada, everywhere. You're seeing a lot of monopoly power, well, duopoly or triopoly powers are exceeding and winning because there's a very hard to enter the market. It's very costly and so on. And they impeded the actual free market because they put up all these boundaries around for anybody to actually come out and compete with them and actually put forward a lot better products and so on. But the entries have been so hard because of government, Ray Dalio. I'm sorry, but you're totally wrong on this one. I do like a lot of his work. He's a very smart guy, but here he's totally wrong.
Yeah, something tells me there's something going on. Whether it's he made some big charitable donation and now he wants to now that he's put his money in these different types of charitable trusts and he's not going to be subject to this. That oh hey just raise everybody's income because he gets taxed based on capital gains and now his money's probably in various types of charitable trusts that is locked up and exempt from this anyways, which basically is what I gave a talk on in Acapulco last year in 2018. And I do want to also mention that you guys who are watching the live stream noticed at the bottom it does say please head to dlive.tv to support decentralized media. So right now I believe we don't have a WAM channel set up, but I've got my own personal channel I guess as a backup here. So that's / the Liberty Advisor. So if you go to, and I've been streaming to DLive for a while. I mean probably like one or two people have been watching, if that. But we're also going to Twitch, my own personal YouTube page, as another backup. Only like 80 people or so subscribe to that. Facebook. So it's just a way to eventually try to beat all these censors over here because with the information that we're getting out there, obviously the powers that be do not want this type of information being out. So we need to have backup ways. And a lot of people are complaining about the ads, but we don't set the ads when it comes to the YouTube. It's and Josh has gotten absolutely devastated from a shadow banning perspective. And another way that you guys can basically help support the show is if you guys I am taking on clients personally. I've been a financial advisor for over 10 years, made a lot of really good calls and helped people make a lot of money. But one thing we are doing for people, as we mentioned before, we have portfolios that are set up where if everything does crash, because everybody realizes what's going on, then we've got ways where you're going to be much better off and then can buy things, have money to buy up everything half off. Or because what I think is ultimately going to happen is if things go down, the Fed's going to acquiesce even more. They might drop rates even below zero, print trillions of dollars, and then we are going to see the melt up that we referenced before. And so I sort of have a strategy, and I'm sort of dubbing this, just kind of coming up with this right now, boom bust portfolio, because whether we're in a boom or in a bust, I basically have it designed to maximize either way. And then as I'm getting clients, what I'd like to do then is give it back to WAM, where we can help build a website, because this stuff isn't free. We need to have social media marketers. We need to have video editors. We need to have probably a manager so that way John can spend more time doing research and not having to be at his day job. That way Josh can actually go and spend more time researching and going off getting into trouble in Mauritania and other places, other ventures he's going to. And that way I can help myself build as well, because this is an effort where many hands make light work. There's probably a lot of you out there who are probably interested in the services I have to offer, but if I'm not willing to, one of my clients said this, he's like, hey Tim, I like when you gave an advertisement, because if you're not willing to promote yourself, then who's going to promote you? And so I'm only saying this because I actually do believe we can help people here and have a win-win-win for everybody. And another thing we are doing is getting cryptos into IRAs where you actually hold on to the private keys, and probably was the first financial advisor in America to do that, because we are seeing a lot of live comments, at least they were about hey, how come you guys are covering crypto or Digibyte? And actually, I was trying to get the Digibyte guy on my podcast a little while back. I believe his name is Jared. So I do have his contact information. And now that I guess there is, an appetite for that, I don't own any. I'm not pushing it. I just happen to see a lot of that in the comments right now. And I guess going along with the cryptos, and one of the news that actually, I'm not sure if John has actually seen this because we didn't talk about this ahead of time, is Binance, Shapeshift, and Kraken have actually all delisted BSV. So that is Bitcoin Satoshi. That is Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. I'm glad that brings a smile to your face. It definitely brings a smile to my face. And who knows, maybe now we'll be on the list where fake Satoshi will come and try to sue us now for, claiming that he is not the real Satoshi. And so this is just, this isn't meant to be a crypto show right now, but I did want to just point it out because we have seen a lot of comments in the comment section about what's going on in crypto, and I did want to point it out because I thought that was hilarious. But shifting gears again, and this is kind of, I guess, sort of the last topic I want to talk about today would be
Tim. If I could just break in for a second, because I'm watching the live stream right now, and if people just hit the like button, because that help us even spread it further on YouTube, that will help it a lot, gain more momentum and get the voice, the actual word out there. And as well, if you guys have any questions to me and Tim at the end when we're all done here, you could give us a super chat or something, or just post in the comments, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A right at the end of the show here. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good because myself, I'm a certified financial planner, chartered retirement planning counselor, ran the endowment fund that lost the least amount of money in 2008. I mean, basically called the was telling people January 4th of 2018. I had a video, Facebook Live, where I'm like, anyone buying Ripple right now, I hope you lose all your effing money because this is such a crazy mania. And then was trying to set up trust strategies so people could sell their crypto into these types of trusts, which is how I know like what Dalio and all these guys do is they sell into charitable trusts. They get a big tax break, at least for the U.S. investors, and then they pull income from there. So let's say they've got $1 million in there, they're pulling out maybe 5% a year, so they're getting $50,000 a year. They get a huge tax break.
The Gates, everybody does that.
Yeah, there's also, and I've helped setting up that for people right now, whether it's in highly appreciated stocks. Maybe you bought stock a while back for a few $1,000s and now it's millions of dollars. Whether you bought crypto when it was Bitcoin when it was $1 and now you want to maybe peel some off because you need some to live off of. Although I will mention that that's something you probably want to do if you think Bitcoin is going to go up. Not a great time to do that right now because the tax deductions based off the value when you transfer it in there. But so there's ways where I can help people out whether the price of crypto is low or whether the price of crypto is high. So if you've got economic questions, crypto questions, stock market questions, I can't give advice on specific crypto or specific stocks because there's all sorts of regulatory hurdles if I do get into that. Same reason why like Peter Schiff, you'll never hear him talk about individual stocks unless it's something in the news because they've got us by the what when it comes to all that. But maybe people are like maybe, hey, since Josh isn't on, we don't want to ask any questions, or maybe they aren't digging the jean jacket. I don't know what's going on today, but anyways, I do want to kind of get into a little bit of political analysis where there is an article, and this is, timely because yesterday was, theft day for Americans where our taxes are due. And despite 66% of Americans getting a cut, only 20% believe their taxes were lowered. And so one thing that is very important to remember that perception is actually greater than reality. And so if people are perceiving something to be one way, that is actually more important than what something really is. But on the other hand, people are perceiving the economy is better than it really is. So is that false perception going to outweigh this other false perception in terms of the tax cuts? But, it is my opinion that the tax cuts did go to the wealthiest people around. I had a podcast on it the day Trump announced his tax plan. Now, his initial tax plan they were going to come out with was way better than the one they actually came out with, in my opinion. And this sort of then dovetails into another article by Caitlin Johnstone, who I'm not from. I thought this was the lady from InfoWars, young girl with went to Kent State with the AR-15 on her back, but I'm not sure if it's the same one. But essentially, this article talks about Caitlin Johnson warns Trump supporters are hurting Assange with their 4D chess talk. And I think that both these articles sort of blend together. So for me, I don't know if you want to take it from here, John, in terms of 4D chess and Assange, because I couldn't even. I give you guys kudos for making that video right away about Assange because I was so pissed off that and triggered that anyone who's following my Facebook could see that I didn't even want to go on
Yeah.
there because I'd probably violate YouTube's community standards with f bombs. But now it's been a few days later and I see all these Trump tards out there saying, well, it's actually a good thing that he took down Assange because Assange is a traitor and Assange is not even a journalist, and really what's going on is he's bringing him here and we're going to now get all this information out, and this information is then going to lead to the arrest of Hillary and Obama, and then he's going to be pardoned, and you just watch because you don't have the 4D chess. And it's this such ridiculousness that if you're not willing to stand with your friends in these tough times, then who are you going to stand with? And what did Trump say about what did he say about Assange? Like, oh, WikiLeaks, yeah, it's not really my deal, not really my thing. Yeah, sorry guys, it's not something I really pay attention to. Even though I can almost guarantee, I bet he had like at least 100 references on his Twitter. I haven't Googled this or search engine this. And then you've got, who was the other guy that took it down? You had Sean Hannity then took down all of his WikiLeaks references. So, what are your opinions when it comes to, all this 4D chess talk, when it comes to Trump, when it comes to Assange, when it comes to the Fed?
Yeah, well, Tim, I guess we got to ask the IMF, the World Bank, and the other development banks that just recently, just a month before Julian Assange was in prison, gave about $10.2 billion in loans to bail out the banks and the government in Ecuador. How about that? How about we ask some real questions here that you don't see in mainstream media? They just talk about, oh yeah, he exposed a little bit here and there about things. He actually was a real journalist. He was me and Josh were quite biased because we're voluntarists. We want individual freedom for people. So we are kind of a little bit biased with our news. Actually, Julian Assange was very unbiased. He was moving forth and back, but he actually put out and leaked all this information that was secret. I've been in military intelligence in Norway, working for NATO up there, which you're not supposed to tell anybody that we work for NATO up on the Russian-Norwegian border. But it's ridiculous. That's what's going on, and it's all these secrets that we keep from the people. Well, who's funding the military? Who's funding the government?
So is this
Well,
breaking that world alternative media is actually a Russian front? is that basically what you're saying right now? That it's just
that's exactly
Putin,
what it is.
Putin came in our ear and said, "Hey, this is what you guys need to cover today."
Yeah, no, 100%. That's what we do here at World Alternative Media. We like to peddle for the Russians because it's so important to tell the truth in the way of what the Russians believe the world is looking like. No, this is a real thing. Nobody in mainstream media covered the bailout of the banks and the Ecuadorian government that happened, and that's just getting brushed away. It's as much as what happened just recently with the big announcement that Macron was gonna come out with against the Yellow Vests and what was happening there.
The
Suddenly,
actual
the
Rothschild banker. Yeah, the actual Rothschild banker, Emmanuel Macron, who literally working for the Rothschild family. You can't even. It's not even like you got to take this like the Trump tards are doing with their 4D chess of making these all these different connections. 50 Hail Marys out there. This is like he worked directly for the Rothschild bank. End of story.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
Yeah, he did, and I see that on LinkedIn. If you go on his LinkedIn profile, you'll actually see he's unfortunately on my second level of contacts. I don't know who is connected to that. I know, but just looking at his profile, that he worked for the Rothschilds Bank for about 4 years. And he is he's not being groomed or anything. But what was interesting here is that he actually came out. He was supposed to come out with a big announcement on the Yellow Vest movement, and then right before, he was supposed to, about an hour before, the Notre Dame, cathedral just starts burning. We could all make our assumptions about that, but that's kind of a weird thing. And then, of course, he canceled that announcement, this massive announcement. And now, of course, in France, everybody's talking about the Notre Dame, and everybody's raising money, and the government is going to put in a whole bunch of money to save it and rebuild it again. Meanwhile, the people that are standing up in France, for example, that guys like Julian Assange was helping around the world, these people that are up against the government, getting pushed down and censored. and so on. And he's helped those people all around the world. And now you're seeing this whole censorship with the Yellow West, where most of the media all over Europe, all over Canada, everywhere, nobody's talked about that. There's been, I think it's like 23 or to 25 weeks now, constant weekends on mass protests in Paris, and nobody's covering it in mainstream media. And that is what they're trying to stop. And the dark day that what happened with Julian Assange when they came and apprehended him. And I believe, personally, in my opinion, I think that this was just a payoff using, of course, the IMF, which is a loan shark, basically, that goes out to these third world nations, give out loans to corrupt leaders. The corrupt leaders take the money, and then the population is sitting back on a mass debt to the IMF, which they have their banksters' friends comes in and then buy their assets, their infrastructure, their commodities for next to nothing.
So basically, right out of John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman, what's going on?
Exactly like that. It comes directly out of that, and that's what they're doing. That's what they're meant for. They're basically a economic hit squad that comes out there with the IMF, and it was great because Ecuador was struggling, right? And was an easy payoff to get Assange. And I guess Assange was worth $10.2 billion to get in prison because he's been a thorn in the side to the authorities for a very long time. And not to mention what's his name, the gal that just was Manning, of course, that just came was put in solitary confinement as well. And they're trying to look at how they colluded together and what put them away for a very long time. I think Julian Assange is looking at 5 years. How much for that is 5 or 40 or 10D or whatever chess you think you can play? I think this whole QAnon and all this movement with Donald Trump, what it did, and what
I've actually heard it can be like up to 50 years because they can stack all these different 5-year charges on. So I did see where it was 5, but then it was really closer to 50. But that's 40 chess.
Yeah, but what's sickening is you see this whole movement and complacency that happened when Trump got in because of things like QAnon. And you got to trust the plan, trust the guy. And that's the same thing that the left said with Obama. And then they're pissed off at Obama because he was one of the biggest banker bailouts people in American history. So they are getting duped time upon time again by these leaders that are, putting forward this great promise of change, or here in Canada, it was real change with Trudeau. And look at what they've gotten us into. And we keep on trusting. And I think it's human nature to believe and think that, this leader is going to do something great for the country because he's a strong guy. He's going to stand up to all these corrupt people out there, the corrupt corporations, the corporate fascists that are running the game. This time it's going to be different. And of course, it turns out to be the completely different, and now we're looking at Trump again, basically begging the Federal Reserve to print mass amounts of money and just pushing this whole agenda again. I believe, even no matter how much you want to change things, if you get into politics, I've seen it firsthand. I created a political party here in Canada. You are seeing this change. It's just falling apart as you get into it, unfortunately, because people are corrupted by money and corrupted by power. And unfortunately, that's what the political structure is doing to society.
Yeah, a lot to chew on with all that, but at least one good thing is that now with through blockchain technology, there's going to be solutions where in the future they can never stop us, they can never censor us, they can't shadow ban us, and and all this is going to end up making us stronger. Where they're going to wish they kept us in their Facebook, YouTube, gulags where it was already 99% controlled, because what's coming up now is going to be systems where they can't stop us. And so this is another article that I wasn't planning on talking about before, but it was something that you sort of reminded me of. And I will give a shout out to Sterling Lujan, who I saw this originally from his Facebook page, but it's WikiLeaks Cache now hosted on IPFS, that's interplanetary file sharing, thanks to this Bitcoin Cache developer. And so essentially it's memo.cache, as I believe is a Bitcoin Cache application, sort of like a social media network. And basically there's a link on there in the blockchain that then goes to an IPF server. So as long as Bitcoin Cache and IPFS, right now Ernie, if he's listening, is going nuts, probably. These are all his buzzwords.
Ernie! What
So,
did you do?
yeah, I actually showed him this article at his house at a party we were having
Yeah.
this past weekend, and he was definitely digging it. But yeah, it's truth is treason, and the empire lies. And with as long as the Bitcoin Cash network and as long as the IPFS network are up, which the only way to shut them down or essentially kick in the door of every single person running a Bitcoin Cash node or every single person running an IPFS node, which there's no way they're going to be able to do that. If they shut down the internet. And we have seen some people commenting, hey, if they shut down the internet, your Bitcoin's gonna be worthless. Well, there are ways, even through like a CB radio, you can send a transaction, or through like an SMS text message.
Yeah, they've done that. They send it through actual regular radio. So there's no way to stop.
And guess
it.
what? All your money in the bank,
and file sharing, and yeah.
And all your fiat in the bank, what's going to happen to that? What's going to happen to that if the whole entire internet goes down? You think that's going to be there safe? It's just absolutely ridiculous. And at this point, I'm trying to think what else is going on. But I really do think that given all this 4D chess talk, given all the talk, given all the the acquiescence of the Federal Reserve, given what's happening with Donald Trump, where there was a lot of people. I mean, he's not going to lose because of me. He's going to lose because of the millions of people like me, the Ron Paul revolutionary type people who are out there who saw what was going on with the Federal Reserve, who, I was out there, waving signs, ran a marathon carrying a Ron Paul banner at a full 26.2 miles, doing everything I could. And I would say I was more effective in promoting Trump, but I was promoting Ron Paul a lot harder. I just wasn't as effective from a social media standpoint. And all you have to do is really piss off, a very tiny percentage of libertarians who voted for Donald Trump, which there's a lot of. Even a lot of people in Acapulco, they're not going to necessarily, come out there and wear it on their back of saying, hey, I voted for Trump. But there are quite a few people who came up to me and saying like, hey, I voted for Trump and heard you did. But, I have been super critical. Anyone that goes to the Liberty Advisor Facebook page will see, that 99% of the time after he was elected, I'm pointing out the things that he's doing wrong. Because I'm not there as his personal cheerleader. I'm there to help save my kids, save my grandkids. I'm not going to say save the country. I just don't want to be an economic slave. And what I see going on is that there's enough of, I don't say us, but there's enough people out there like me, you, all of our listeners out there who know what's going on. You're going to say, screw you, Donald Trump. Like, why am I going to go, bust my ass to then, perpetuate this false, phony system that is still, propping up the very same bankers that he's then surrounding himself with Goldman Sachs people left and right. Like, think I, bust my butt to have guys like Gary Cohn. And yeah, I know he's out of there now. Mr. Carbon Tax was his, economic advisor. Then now he's got Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow was a guy, I've been on Facebook since 2004, one of the first 20, 30 schools in the world that was on it. And the very first TV show that I said I liked, which is very weird for like an 18-year-old to say, was the Kudlow Report. So anyone saying like that, I don't know what I'm just a Larry Kudlow hater. I was watching Larry Kudlow when I was 14 years old, and probably so was Josh, maybe when he was like 4, so maybe Rob, his dad, had it on the back. I don't know. So anyways, with Larry Kudlow, he is there as a guy that's always perpetuating the status quo, not status quo, but perpetuating whatever Republican puppet is in there. And so he is there to basically shut down the dissent, because he was dissenting a lot about what Donald Trump was doing. You get him in there in the White House, all of a sudden, no more dissent. Same thing with Stephen Moore. Basically he's a guy that says a lot of things that we say. Get him in there, and then you can bet your butt he's going to stop saying that stuff. Guys like Alan Greenspan used to talk a lot like you and I talk, and then his whole rationale is, well, if I didn't acquiesce in this stuff, if I didn't, then it'd have somebody else in there. Other person there would be worse than me. So, this whole, game theory of, I'd rather have myself be in there and, kind of manipulate it, in my direction than have, somebody else in there. And so again, more 4D chess. And then, you listen to Alan Greenspan, basically sounds like us. I know you guys, I believe, did a report, recently where you were talking about Alan Greenspan and, and then there's stuff in the past where, he was for gold and, a lot of these guys and, maybe the bankers are going to come after you and me next because, they can probably be like, oh, hey, these guys know what's going on. Because, the other guys, they don't know what's going on, but they're just, puppets that go along to get along. And so I really do think Donald Trump is going to have a hard time winning in 2020. I was over a year in advance saying that I thought that he had a great shot at winning. I wasn't going to say like, oh, guarantee 110%, and all these guys like MAGA. I was calling it all along. I basically, as soon as he came down the stairs, I'm like, hey, he's got a way better shot at winning than you guys realize, because he knows the game plan. The game plan to defeat Hillary is to go after all the misdeeds and crimes and other stuff that she's done.
Pretty simple.
And nobody else had the balls to do that. And so I commended
No, of
him on
course.
that. And I actually had an article that I came out with right before the election where it was called An Exhaustive Compilation of Hillary's Crimes, Lies, Hypocrisies, and Dubious Connections. Originally, this was going to be a 1 through 10 list. It ended up, I ended up going through the alphabet almost twice and then just had to then release it. And it's funny seeing how many of these YouTube links have either been taken down, and a lot of them have to do actually with WikiLeaks. And here we go. This is the first meme that basically got me to some sort of prevalence on Facebook is when's the last time Trump kissed a grand dragon? And it's Robert Byrd kissing Hillary. But, a lot of this stuff on here is directly from WikiLeaks. And a lot of it's from citizen journalists. And we've got, links here where it's, the real reasons why we invaded Libya was to protect United States and France's monetary interests. We've got other ones where, it's basically they're acknowledging that the Saudis and ISIS are basically both funding, the Saudis funded ISIS and funding Hillary. And, it's interesting to note that the one time my website was going underneath a DNS attack was as I was posting these links to Gaddafi and all this other stuff going on. But, it's just absolutely crazy. And just because, we're talking bad, just because, the left is absolutely insane doesn't mean that Donald Trump is right. And just because Donald Trump, on many things, there's many things I like. I like how he's calling out the politicians. I like how he's, at least culturally getting people to realize that there's fake news, that, not to trust. So I think that that is very important. But what's more important is making sure that our kids, that you and I, or everyone watching, are not economic slaves. And by playing patty cake with the Federal Reserve, there's a lot of people who are like me, like you, like everyone listening right now, who are going to say, you know what? I'm either, and there's probably different camps. There's probably, one camp out there who say, hey, I'm just not going to vote. Another camp that might vote Libertarian. Another camp that might vote for Donald Trump. Another camp that's just going to be like, hey, you know what? Screw it. It doesn't even matter. We're done with voting. And, I think that there's, you can war game it out either way of how you feel. And it probably also depends who the Democrats are going to run. And one thing, I guess maybe I want to follow up with this is I've been seeing a lot of talks of this John, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, like Buttigieg or something like this. And I've sort of been seeing him out there in the ethos everywhere. And part of me thinks that maybe he's going to be the next guy that they try propping up. It's sort of, I see like these trial balloons coming up like from every direction of this John Buttigieg. And I'm not an expert on him. I don't know that much about him, but something tells me that he's going to be, the more like moderate, sort of like the John Kasich of the right, who then, is a, because I believe he's a gay guy who is in the military. So at least with having that military credentials, he sort of takes the kind of red meat away from Donald Trump in a little regard. And so I think that would be a wise move, but because they're not smart enough to run like a Tulsi Gabbard who might beat him. Because the rest of them, Elizabeth Warren at this point I think is way too politically defeated. Maybe at this point the audience might not even care, but just want to if there's any kind of closing comments you have on that, or if anyone has any comments. I haven't been looking at the comments because I've been trying to juggle a bunch of this, but
yeah. So, anyways, guys, let's cut to the point where we look at if you guys have any questions for us, we would love to talk about the economy. If you got questions about what's currently happening around the world, if you haven't covered that and you have some questions, please put them down, because we're just trying to wrap this up because we're getting up a little bit over an hour, so we should get this done. And but it's been I believe I really enjoyed listening to your expertise, Tim, and you really have such a wealth of knowledge and understanding of the financial markets and also what's going on with politics, especially in the United States. So you're a wealth of knowledge, and we're very excited to have you on here at World Alternative Media. But if you guys could just put down any questions you might have, or any concerns that's with the current economy, what's happening out there, because there's a lot of things going on right now where we see the push for cashless all across the world. And especially I did a presentation on cashless over in Paso Robles, California with Jador Griffin, where I talked about how the Scandinavian countries are trying to go cashless. And we were talking about taxes there, Tim. And of course, one of the number one things that they come after when it comes to going cashless, the number one reason is taxation. It's to extort more money from the population, unfortunately.
Control.
And control, of course, and having a massive control. They literally can take all of your economic power away from you with just a flicker of a, click on a program, and then you'll be without money and without actual economic control, because they're taking away the only legal tender electronic currency that you could use as a medium of exchange. It's very dangerous. But
It
if
looks like
that
we do it.
doesn't,
Looks like
yeah,
we did. The only question seems like we got a couple of things here.
yeah,
Is will the markets make it through the summer? That's coming from Rick. And right now, I
yeah,
mean, I have. It depends what markets you're talking about, but my personal opinion is the same that I had when I came out with my video in early October. And some of the articles we've referenced today is I really don't know where it's going to go. I originally came out with a presentation in January 2017 called "The Trump Effect: Why Bad News is Good News." The premise, and maybe John's getting sick of me reiterating this, but a lot of your listeners don't know. So this presentation was that there was going to be all this good news, and that the good news in terms of like tax cuts meant that the Federal Reserve is going to lose the excuse to not raise rates. That would then lead to the rates having to go up, which would then be the bad news. And now I've sort of dubbed it, where we've had so much bad news coming out, that the bad news has now meant that the Federal Reserve is not going to raise rates, and that's been solidified, which has then turned it into quote unquote good news. And so at some point, it depends, will bad news be bad news? And if bad news is bad news, then it might be bad news for the markets. But if bad news continues to be good news, then who knows? And so that's why we do have a strategy that you guys can find out more information about myself
exactly.
at the libertyadvisor.com, where we are running money for people, where right now I'm sort of dubbing it like my boom bust strategy. I did come up with that today, sort of stealing that from Dr. Is it Faber, or I can't remember.
Mark Faber.
Mark Faber. He's got the gloom,
Yeah.
doom, and boom report, so sort of kind of stealing that from him. But yeah, it's a way where I don't know what it's going to do. Will good news be good news, or well, we don't have any good news. Will the bad news be good news, or will the bad news be bad news? And that's, I think, the story of the game, or will other economies, as John's pointed out, a ton of times in the past. And we had a great podcast that we did on my channel. I know it's on BitChute, where we talked about everything going on in the global economy. And so sometimes we're able to divert bad stuff that's going on in America. We're able to trying to appropriate it, as a SJW term, to other countries, where we kind of shift it somewhere else, and then it could be the somewhere else and then comes back to America. So I think whether or not we're even able to hold things together here, I think ideally Trump would like to see things collapse over somewhere else, like whether it's Canada, Australia, basically you name it, and then that way he could say, hey, it was the Federal Reserve that screwed me, and I didn't do any of this, and these other, if it wasn't for that, and if it wasn't for these other countries' economies, then we would have this bust breakout number, and you guys need to elect me again, so then that way we can actually repeal healthcare, because I couldn't do it when we controlled all the branches beforehand. And so this time we're definitely going to be able to repeal healthcare. So hopefully, I'm not sure if that answered it. Not sure if John, if you got anything more to add onto Rick's question about markets being able to make it through the summertime.
No, I think anything could happen there again, and but I definitely believe and see that something is definitely lurking out there. People are so complacent with everything that's happening in the economy right now. Nobody's really worried, but you've seen all these warning signs everywhere that comes out from the big economic analysts and academics out there, saying that we're getting less and less growth in the economy. So we are definitely up for some kind of action happening. We don't know exactly what it is. It could be some big events that's going to trigger, quantitative easing and money printing from the Fed and other central banks around the world. I do believe we're going to see some big crashes, and I think it's first going to start in the periphery economies, the bigger ones that didn't get hit so bad in 2008, as I mentioned. Nor Scandinavia, Canada, UK, England, Australia, and so on. They are the ones that I believe that's where it's going to start, and it's already started in Toronto, Vancouver, here, where real estate markets are.
Because people can't even afford to live there, and the asset prices, aka the inflation, that there's no inflation, keep going up so much that the people can't afford to be there. And so eventually something has to break. It can't just all be Chinese flooding into Vancouver to prop up everything forever. I mean, that can only go on so long, especially if they're having problems in China, and especially if they are cracking down on that sort of stuff.
No, 100%. So, but what they're seeing is they're trying to kind of manipulate. They came in actually here in Canada, the CMHC, which is kind of like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac over in the United States. They came in and said that we're gonna give people that get into a mortgage now 10% more in a down payment. So they actually, the
Speaking of
government
corporate
is putting down their
fascism.
down payment. Yeah, so you're having the government coming in and subsidizing in order to try to prop up the markets, unfortunately. And I see that this is probably going to happen sometime soon. You have so many. It's been very calm for a very long time, but then suddenly the volatility, started in 2018 quite drastically, and then of course it trickled into January, February, and now we're seeing kind of complacency again. People are very, like, I've been watching the stock markets try to do it on a daily basis, and it's been staying quite steady. There's no like huge ups or downs, but then suddenly there's going to be something coming out that's going to scare the water out of people again. And I believe, I don't know how much longer they could keep propping us up. You either have a big crash that's gonna. I believe we're gonna see deflation first, and then we're gonna see the panic from the banksters with mass amounts of printing, of course, from the Federal Reserve and others, and then trying to push the economy up again. You got to remember though. We've had, in the United States, $1 trillion getting pushed into the economy by the United States deficit spending, right? So you still have had mass amounts of money printing, even though we hadn't had quantitative easing from the Federal Reserve. But what you're seeing is the end of the control, I believe, from these central entities, and they're really starting to struggle to prop it up because you need ever, increasing amounts of debt to push up the asset prices a little bit more.
It's like a drug dealer needs more drugs to get another fix.
Exactly.
Alcoholic needs more alcohol.
More heroin, and you're getting, not the hit, not getting the feeling anymore. So you're starting to shoot everywhere in your legs, so in your eyeballs at the end of it, and that's where we're kind of headed, like where we basically are right now, where there's no more, veins left in your body to, induce and inject the monetary heroin. So I think
I'm glad. You know what? I'm really glad. I'm really glad you just said that, because this is not even scripted. I just pulled this up right now, where we injected cocaine and heroin into the system to create a wealth effect from Richard Fisher, the former Dallas head Fed. Where I'm not sure if we can play this because of YouTube and all the stuff that they do of trying to say it's whether, and we know it's fair use, but they're going to come out and say it's not fair use. But essentially, this is Richard Fisher saying that we used cocaine and heroin to create a wealth effect, and now we're keeping things going via Ritalin. And so I just remember that off the top of my head. It's very funny you just mentioned that. And this is the former head of the Dallas Fed saying this. It's not John and Tim saying this. This is the former Dallas head Fed saying this. And it's just we're in a system that there's no way you can ever get out of this. And then the last thing that somebody did point out that I do want to mention is I'm just trying to find the comment, but Pasadena.com said calling out fake news is most important, not just important. I do agree with you, because I did come out with a fake news list basically before anybody else, and I've got this pulled up right now. This was November 16th, 2016, or maybe it was the 17th, and very rarely do I make my own memes. Back in the day I was, but I had it was called Fake News List. I've got it up there right now. I know John isn't seeing this, but it says, Snopes, Washington Post, Huffington Post, all the usual suspects. There's one person on here by name. That one person is Paul Krugman. I'm sure everyone here probably knows who he is. And then didn't you know that about a year and a half later, Paul Krugman then ends up winning Donald Trump's award for being the most fake news? So you heard it here first. And the only other person that I could see who came up with a fake news list before around the same time was me, not before me, was 2 days after me, was actually Ron Paul. So I'd say I'm in pretty good company that Ron Paul's people put out a fake news list 2 days after me. I had 2 interns work for like 40 hours straight one week to do nothing but try to like disprove this, because I'm like, hey, I don't want to be making this claim because it sounds ridiculous. But I mean, the genesis of this is that basically this crazy professor, Melissa Zimdars of New Hampshire, said that, we're fake news, and basically everyone that we listen to is fake news. And I do have that list pulled up as well. So this is sort of like a little origin of fake news that people don't really realize. So this professor, there's 4 different categories of fake news. And so of course, Zero Hedge is on there. So everything we've been telling you guys is fake news. InfoWars is on there, Liberty Radio Network on there, Liberty Talk FM.
Yeah. Is this the Proper Not, I believe?
Yeah. So
organization or whatever it was called. I do remember watching that and was like, hey, this is interesting.
Yeah, and so that same day, so that exact same day, I was like so triggered by this. I'm like, you know what? So I went into like PowerPoint and I made a fake news list, and this was it. So this, and then I went
Yeah.
super viral, and people started taking it, which it's fine. The whole point of me creating my page was then to show other people. I'm like, hey, this is actually pretty easy. Like I just all of a sudden I got like 30,000 people subscribing to me after like 2 months, and I can show everybody else how to do this, and this is insane. Like how easy it is to like game the system. And then then all of a sudden it became not very easy. And then after they did this, Tim Picciott got shadow banned, and no one's finding me anymore. But yeah, all my early interviews were like, hey, this is so easy, and this is not about me, and this is how you can do it. And if just we had if we had like 1,000 people out there doing this sort of stuff, the system would. I mean, 1,000 people out of 6 billion is not very many. If we had 1,000 people as this effective, reaching tens of millions of people, which is what Josh is doing, what's what you were doing, what Chris Rice Crypto is doing. Everyone is being the change over here. It's not about us. It's about getting this information out, having you guys do your own thing, whether it's creating blogs, whether it's telling your neighbors, whether it's telling other people about us, whether it's smashing the like button, whether it's working with us, whether it's sending $1 or two, whether it's joining the subscribe star, whether making your own like Twitter posts, doing something, except just sitting there doing nothing is the only thing we ask you guys not to do. And right now, I'm trying to see if there's any more questions. Doesn't look like that. I know my wife's coming home soon with the kids, so definitely have to get going. But you guys can head over to, again, we were streaming live to dlive.tv/The Liberty Advisor, which is one of my own backup channels. We will get one. We will get one for Wham as well, or maybe I'll just go ahead and do it and then tell Josh, hey, we've got it. I've got a Twitch on there as well, so everything is /The Liberty Advisor. I know that's Amazon controlled, so that's why DLive was always the one that I was preferring, and so it's great now that PewDiePie's over there. There should be some. There should be not. I mean, I never watched PewDiePie, but with him comes a lot of gravitas and comes a lot of other support. So
of course, and I think he sees what's happening with YouTube as well. Like he's one of the prime contributors at YouTube. But I just want to mention we just got a super chat from Broken Components, and he's a new subscriber and says, "Thank you guys for what you do. We really, really appreciate that. Great thanks to you for giving us the money. It really helps every little money out there that comes in our way. Really helps us to further, forward and focus our time on, contributing and giving you the best possible content. So we really, really appreciate that. Thanks again, Broken Components. And also just want to mention two more things there that Rick, of course, is saying. He says that people are shorting the Canadian banks. Yes, I know about that. And I actually exposed. I was the first one to come out and show how short Canadian banks are on cash. I do have some charts that I posted several times on World Alternative Media that you look at, which shows that banks are 5 till 2% with cash, and then the credit unions are even worse in Canada. They're 3 till 0.5% cash to deposits. So they're doing really bad here in Canada. And of course, Rick says another important thing that helps everybody here, and that is starting your own business and starting to because when you start up a business, you're taking advantage of the current tax system, which is written against you. This is actually the reason why I got into this in the first place is because of Robert Kiyosaki. The book Rich Dad Poor Dad, where you're exposed to the how the tax system is written against you. It's so important to take advantage of that. And start your own business is a huge advantage, of course, that you can do to mitigate the tax hit that you get from the IRS or the CRA or Skatteetaten in Norwegian, whoever a governmental entity that's siphoning and
whatever organized crime syndicate is currently extorting you.
But Tim, I think we are done here right now. We really appreciate all of you guys that have been watching us today. And Tim, I really appreciate everything that you do and your technical skills over there over in Arizona. We really appreciate what you bring to the table, and of course your knowledge and everything. It's greatly, greatly appreciated, Tim. And if you just want to comment some last words, and we'll wrap it up there, Tim.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Interviewing is not necessarily a forte, so I know I've seen getting some beat up a little bit in the comments of hey, this guy talks too much, because I did an interview with Tom Hegna, and it was meant to be more of like a podcast type style, not necessarily an interview. And I'm learning. I just want to get the information out there, so hopefully you guys don't beat me up too much on there. But no, in terms of the information, I think I really, appreciate, having this opportunity to get information out to the masses. If there's topics you guys want us to cover, questions ahead of time, just let us know. Cause I know a lot of people are probably like, who the hell is this guy? I'm here for John. I'm here for Josh. And, but yeah, no, the topics I cover are basically everything in your guys' wheelhouse. I mean, mainly, economics, stock market, retirement, cryptocurrencies, and, pretty much the entire gambit, and, pretty good geopolitically as well. I mean, there wasn't too many people sticking their neck out there for Donald Trump, saying that he was going to win, way out in advance. I mean, my grandfather had to stage an intervention with me, thinking that I was crazy. I mean, I even ended up buying like a signed MAGA hat, thinking like, hey, I think he can win, and then he's probably going to get assassinated, and then this hat's going to be worth a lot of money. Not that I was, I would not believe me, I was not hoping for that in case, the FBI is watching this or anything like that. But, I'm sort of shocked it didn't happen. But no, thank you guys for having me on. I'm going to be coming out with more videos as well. Probably do more live streams because, my man Gary Vaynerchuk, maybe some of you guys are watching, familiar with him. He says you want to, document, not necessarily create. Because doing this, I mean, a lot of this was, us ad-libbing. I didn't know half these articles I didn't have pulled up until, we were talking. I sort of feel like Jamie from Joe Rogan, pulling up these articles on the fly. But it was great, having this with you guys. Thank you so much, and talk to you guys later. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks again, Tim. It's been a pleasure, and I think we're gonna have a lot of more of these exciting live streams, and we're also gonna put out some reports and contents coming up when Josh is, of course, in Africa. Well, looking at the interesting Richard structure and the potential that it could be the Atlantis, the hidden city that nobody has really. There's only been one person visiting there, so it's very exciting what Josh is doing there. And meanwhile, when Josh is there, me and Tim are going to be here covering a lot of the same issues that me and Josh have been covering for so long. And I just want to say thanks again, Tim. This is John Sneisen and Tim Picciott signing up for World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.